In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, good morning. There once was a bishop who heard a confession from a priest, and as he heard the confession, and the priest finished offering his confession to the bishop said, "You forgot to say something." And the priest was very wondering, what did I not say? And the bishop said, "You failed to say something on purpose." And the bishop went on to say that you failed to say that you were not paying attention and that you spilled Holy Communion on the altar table and had the body that fell on the floor because you were careless. And the priest was forgiven after the bishop told him this, but the priest realized that he held something back in the context of confession. And the bishop, having this specific grace of God, was able to call him out on it. Now, that bishop lived 5 centuries ago in the 1600s, and his name is St. Dionysios. And St. Dionysios is right up here on the left. Now, St. Dionysios also, in his lifetime, didn't just call people out on forgiveness, but he offered forgiveness in one of the most critical ways and one of the most poignant stories that you'll ever hear about confession. He was in a monastery. He was a bishop, and he was standing in his cell, and a man came to him, and he knocked on his door, and he said, "I've just killed a man." And the saint brought him in and said, "Tell me your story." And as the man started telling the story to St. Dionysios, he listened, and he heard that the man had killed St. Dionysios' only brother. And the families, St. Dionysios' family and this other family, were feuding back and forth, and there was a lot of ill will and a lot of murder between the two families. And St. Dionysios heard the man's story, and the man was scared because he was being chased, but he was also repentant, realizing what he had done. And St. Dionysios, as is written, heard his story and wept to himself. As tears rolled down his face, the man was on his knees. And that icon I put in the front of the church today as you came in, this icon of St. Dionysios hearing the confession of this man. St. Dionysios heard his confession and forgave him and sent him down to the water to escape, to create a new life for himself. But as St. Dionysios heard his confession, he also became something else in our lives as Orthodox Christians. He became one of the patron saints of Holy Confession and forgiveness. Now, why do I bring him up today? Is because his feast day is on the 17th, coming up this week. But also because his life is such a beautiful blessing to us, and his story is one that takes us from our understanding of what we encounter in people and the lack of forgiveness that we may offer and the lack of confession that we may present to God. St. Dionysios gives us an example of letting things go if someone is genuine and someone is coming to us and asking us for forgiveness despite whatever that sin is or was, that by the grace of God and with a repentant heart, all can be forgiven. Now you might say, well, he's a saint, I'm not. How does that work? We all think that, right? It's deep down embedded. You're like, but I still didn't get my day in court with that person. I still want to tell them this, and I still want to get my upper hand on things. But it doesn't always work that way. We don't always get our day in court. Christ did not prove for his day in court in this life. He didn't kill everyone who was against him. He didn't come off of the cross. He didn't fight his own crucifixion. He endured it to show that the message of the resurrection was greater than any torment that he received in this life. And St. Dionysios, by his great love and by his immaculate life that he had, when he died, He was exhumed 3 years later. Now, this is in the mid-1500s that he was born. And he was exhumed 3 years after his death. And as they took his body out, they realized that he was incorrupt. There was only some teeth that were missing and the tip of his nose. So today, in today's day and age, he is still incorrupt. His body is very dark. It's very darkened over time. And I have mentioned to you recently, I've been talking about some of the walking saints and what that means for those who have been in the Bible study or Orthodoxy 101. And St. Dionysios is considered one of the walking saints. Now he's on on Zakynthos, and he is known for his many miracles that have happened. He is vested, he is processed through the town, through the island, and he is, how do I say this? People come to him with requests, and he is known to have appeared to many. One of the unique things about St. Dionysios is his shoes are changed. And I think I've mentioned some of this to some of you before. His shoes are changed because they show wear on the bottom of his shoes, on some of them. In fact, some people have come back to the monastery and they said, you know, I was drowning in the water, and this saint came to me, and he pulled me out of the water and brought me back, and he walked me up through the seaweed onto the shore and put me there. And I realized it was St. Dionysios. So the person went back to the tomb of St. Dionysios, and they went to venerate his feet. And as the priest opened up the case where his shoes are, where his feet are, they saw that there was seaweed on his shoes. Now, one of the great things about being here with you today, and about the background underwork of my ministry through the years, is I've tried to develop a lot of relationships with a lot of different people in a lot of different places of the world. And one of the great blessings was in the year 2016, I was able to, from the Metropolitan there, to receive a set of St. Dionysios' shoes. They were placed on his feet, and they were there for a time, and then they were given to me. One of those shoes is in the church that I served for 17 years, and the other shoe is right here. So this is the shoe of St. Dionysios. You might be saying, how do you know it's his shoe? It's stamped here, it's signed, it's stamped on the other side with the metropolis and signed with the year 2016. So this shoe was on his foot. It was on for a very short time, so it doesn't show really wear on the bottom. I mean, there's a couple marks, but not many. But some of the shoes that you see from him, you can flip them over and you can see the wear of where his foot was. And you can see scrape marks and scuffs and different wear. So I bring this to you today because it is critically important for you to understand that the saints are alive and well. And it's not 2,000 years ago. It's not something that we read about and we think the Bible was back then and there's no movement, there's no grace, there's no miracles in today's day and age. Because there is. And it's very real, and it's very present. And with a lot of work, these things are here to share with you. So this is one of the things. I was going to bring this on Thursday to the liturgy, and then I realized that many of you are working and can't be here, so I figured I would say his story today, kind of front load the celebration of St. Dionysios, and at the end of the service today to bless you with his shoe. Many times in the services when his body is processed, especially on his feast day, the people will lay down on the ground and the relics will pass over them, and they pray for forgiveness, they pray for the ability to forgive, and they also pray for many different miracles and needs that they have. But why I'm bringing this up to you today, in addition to that, is because we are at the onset of coming to Christmas. We're coming to the birth of Christ. And as we're little, there's one thing that's on our mind, and it's presents. And as we get older, sometimes if we're consumer-minded, we realize that there's an emptiness after Christmas. Some people have said that, the day after Christmas it feels so empty, and because there's no excitement, there's no more gifts or whatever the case is. And then there comes a point in our lives where we realize Christmas is something completely different. And it's not about the gifts, it's about family, it's about God, it's about love, and it's about coming together. And one of the best ways to come together as a Christian family is to let go of some of the things that we may feel that someone has done to us in their offending us or how we perceive things, and to just let it go. And realize too that we can't always have the last word. We can't always be the victor in things. We can't always say, I told you so, and look at me, I'm right. But many times, it's just to say a prayer and to say, God, it is what it is. Let me move on. Let me let this go. And you don't have to say that to somebody's face. You need to say it to God. You don't have to tell someone, I forgive you now. We need to say, God, help them. Make this never happen again between me and them. Make them see something different. And not in an arrogant, egotistical way, but in a way that just lets it go. Because as I've said before, when Christ was on the cross, he forgave. He said, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. Why? Because you can't take that with you, because it will pull you down. So in order to truly embrace the birth of Christ and this season of incarnation, we too have to be born in a different way. I'm not saying being born again Christians, but I'm saying to be born with a new spirit of forgiveness, a new spirit of asking for forgiveness, and putting our pride in the back seat. Pride to put someone down, and also pride that prevents us sometimes from saying we're sorry. Forgive me. I made a mistake. It's when we come to confront our own mistakes and when we see our own sinfulness and our own brokenness that we can look at others and say, you know what? We're all in the same boat together. We're all struggling. We're all working for God's glory in the ways that we can, and we're all getting pulled down by temptations, broken by sins, and pushed away by the torments of life. But focusing on asking for forgiveness and focusing on forgiving can be the greatest gift that you are given. Not that you give, but that you are given. To forgive someone and to let it go helps you. It helps your soul. To ask for forgiveness from God helps your soul. It is a gift that God gives us that can happen every single day. It can happen by letting things go and by making the changes in our own lives. Now, many of you have come for confession in the past few months, which is a beautiful thing. But I want you to consider, too, offering forgiveness to others in a quiet, personal way between you and God. And when you say it, mean it and make the change. And then when we come to the footsteps of the birth of Christ and we celebrate the nativity, then we can say there's nothing holding me back. There's no grudge. There's no joy with the trauma. It's just the joy of the birth of Christ. So if you're having difficulties forgiving, if you're having difficulties asking for forgiveness, reach out to a saint who continues to work to this day in helping people and becoming the patron saint of forgiveness. Now, as you came into the church today, I had that picture that I printed out and I put it on the icon stands in the back. So you could take a look at it again and look at his face in that picture. It's not really an icon, but it shows him looking up with the light coming in and this man just down on his knees asking for the ability to change. Sometimes people will ask us for the ability to allow them to change, and sometimes we simply just have to offer it. So forgive, ask for forgiveness, and realize that change happens in so many people and in so many saints throughout the history of the church. Amen.